Hello, my dear forest dwellers, and welcome to, I think, the first video entry. Honestly, I have no idea why I'm making this video or what the trees are, to be exact. I don't know where we're going to enter this journey, where it's going to lead us, but I'm so excited that you guys are going to embark this journey together with me, and let's just see where it leads us. Now, of course, before we start this journey, I have to give a huge shout out, thank you, I have honestly no idea, to none other than the YouTuber named Wendigoon. I think most of you already know him, pretty big YouTuber, my favorite YouTuber, and he inspired me to journey into the forest. To be honest, if it wasn't for him, I would have just ignored the letter and continued with my day. But no, he inspired me to make this video, even though it's going to be extremely shitty and not somewhere near of his quality, but I hope I can improve over time as we go deeper into the forest and discover more and more interesting topics. Speaking of topics, I can already tell you guys that the topics we're going to find in this forest, find, are going to be a lot different than his, at least not completely. It's still going to be fantasy, some spooky stuff, but I don't care about the real world things. You know, things like disappearances or conspiracies. You know, though I do like conspiracies, we're probably going to cover some of those too, but more of the life where you probably would think that I'm schizophrenic, even though a lot of people already think that, but who cares? But it's going to be a lot of fantasy because this forest is a lot weird. A lot weird is in I don't think so. I'm just going to cut it out anyway. But whatever. So if you guys are interested in fantasy stuff or some biblical stuff or any kind of horror stuff, then this channel might be something for you. And I really hope that you can find yourself a nice place here with us in this weird forest, and that you come with us into this journey. I just completely improvised that intro. I'm pretty sure I made so many grammar mistakes or anything in that way, but who cares? Let's just get right into this tree. Let's see what we find today. And again, huge shout out to Wendigoon, and thank you very much for having such a big impact into my life. And what I'm doing now, wasting my time in the middle of the night, it's currently almost 3 a.m. making this video. Thank you very much. Let's get started with the different species of dragons. So, to begin this video first with, what do I mean with the different species of dragons? As you might know, there are dragons that have 4 legs and 2 wings, dragons that have 2 legs and 2 wings, and the second dragons I just mentioned are called wyverns. This is a species of dragon. Now, you might be confused, and some people say that a wyvern is not a dragon, but I think the easiest way to say it is that these are species of dragons, like there's this huge species dragon, and that in this species there are subspecies. And it might be confusing because the first subspecies is also called dragon, even though I'm probably going to refer to it as European dragon because that's where the image mostly comes from Western Europe, from the Middle Ages. But because of that, I'm making this video, and I do have to say I'm skipping 3 species, which I'm not going to mention. I'm just going to quickly mention them at the end, because the problem with these dragon species are these definitions, these different species that I'm going to mention today, came after all of the dragon mythos. So the dragon mythos was written, the dragons were described, but back then there were barely any species. All of them basically were called just dragon. People just called it a dragon and were fine with it. Nowadays we have all of these categories, all of these species, and because of that it's a bit difficult, or say, yeah, I think difficult is the best word for it, to actually accurately say the species of a dragon in the mythos and also call these something different than a dragon, saying that these are completely different animals. Because of that, I'm just going to refer to them as species, even though I'm still going to write in the title fantasy lizards, because that's a cool way of describing them and I love it. And you could sue me if you want. The first species we're going to cover is the European dragon, or Western European dragon, or simply just the dragon. This dragon species has 4 legs 2 wings, a scaly body, and a scaly tail. Most of the time, only one head, can breathe fire, and is very feared amongst a lot of people. This image of dragon originates from the Middle Ages time in Europe and was mostly developed through mentions of snake-like dragons from Greco-Roman literature or from Eastern descriptions of dragons preserved in the Bible, or also wrong depictions of snakes which were described and falsely drawn with wings or legs. During the 11th and 13th century in Europe, there was like the peak height of interest in dragons as living creatures, as actual animals, when most of the mythos originate, most of the folklore, most of the stories of dragons raging across towns and terrorizing them. This was like the peak time for a dragon story. And because of that, these dragon stories often included this dragon. It's like the standard dragon. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows this description. When you think back to a child of some kind of childhood story, a bedtime story, maybe a fantasy novel you read, the dragon described in that novel probably has 4 legs, 2 wings, and just 1 head. The head type is not really going to be important, but whatever. Often being depicted to have the ability to breathe fire and ravage across towns and terrorizing the townfolk. But these dragons, they stayed up until our time in our modern culture. And I think the best representation for European dragon in pop culture, a dragon with 4 legs and 2 wings, in my opinion, would be a dragon that's well known all across the world, and that is none other than the Night Fury. In case you've been living on the rock, the Night Fury is the species of dragon that is toothless, and that species of dragon in the How to Train Dragons universe is a species of dragon which is the European dragon, because toothless has 4 legs and 2 wings, and his tail only has 1 wing thing. I don't know what they're called. I don't know. I don't even know. What are the things on his head? People call them floppers. They're not his ears. I don't know what they are. But whatever. The Night Fury is a European dragon's type that has black scales and instead of shooting fire, shoots plasma. Night Furies have the ability to retract their teeth, making it seem like they are toothless. Get it? Toothless. Like dragons called. Toothless. Very funny, I know. Whatever. The dragons can get up to 28 feet and 8 inches in length, or if a Night Fury can get up to 8.74 meters in length. And the wingspan of the dragon is either 50 feet, 3 inches, or 15.33 meters. In the How to Train Dragon lore, it's one of the most feared dragons. It's extremely stealthy and to be said to be one of the strongest dragons of all. It's the unholy offspring of death and lightning itself, and terrorized Berg for years, up until Hiccup managed to capture him, hurt him a lot, befriend him, and then they go on a lot of adventures and yada yada yada. I love Toothless. He's a cute dragon. I think he's the best representation for at least the body form of the European dragon. To be more exact, if you look at the mythos of the European dragon, Toothless isn't really like it, but I think he is a good and well-known representation for the European dragon. Really neat. Some energy for this video. Other examples for a European dragon in modern pop culture would be Smaug from The Hobbit, or pretty much every dragon in every child fantasy book, whatever. Often guarding a princess or something like that. But now, let's get into the interesting part, which is the mythological aspect of the European dragon. It's based on the ancient Greek dragon, the par excellence Typhon. Typhon was this serpent-like winged creature that had the ability to breathe fire, which translated later into the modern European dragon we know of today, which is less serpent-like but more chunky and more of a lizard than actually a serpent. But in mythos, it's often seen hoarding a lot of treasure and guarding it, and being like this evil animal that terrorizes towns and scares all the people. And in Christianity, the dragon is often portrayed as a physical or spiritual embodiment of evil or things God will conquer with his might. Which, as a Christian, it's kind of annoying constantly be reminded that the dragon is nothing more than this evil thing that it's just the devil or something, which considering the fact that, okay, yes, the devil does appear as a dragon multiple times in the Bible, but to be fair, he was once an angel, so he like takes forms to tempt us humans. I mean, if you know anything about the devil in a biblical sense, you know that he's not all powerful, he's actually pretty pathetic, and that all the power he has is the things he can make us do, which means him taking the form of a dragon shouldn't mean anything, but that's how it is, that's how it was portrayed throughout mythos, all of Europe, whatever. Let's just talk more about mythological dragons. In and after the Middle Early Ages, dragon was often described as this fire-breathing, horned, scaly creature flying through the sky and terrorizing people. The creature also has leathery bat-like wings, 4 legs, and a long muscular tail. Just so you know, I decided to sit down, so that's why the camera's a bit different now, but who cares. Some depictions of dragon even show them having 1 or more feathered wings, crests, ear frills, fiery manes, or spikes running down their spines, and favorite exotic decorations, which is just another proof of how this type of dragon was seen across all cultures. In the specific mythological story or folklore I want to tell you guys today, which I had many in mind. There are a lot of dragon mythological stories, things like Nibelungen. If you don't know what Nibelungen are, to be honest, the dragon barely even gets mentioned. It's just a small part of the story, but I personally think it's really cool. So basically there's this guy, and I remember reading it as a kid. I thought it was extremely cool of how he got his powers. But there's this guy, and he's like a warrior of some type. I don't know, it's been years since I've read Nibelungen. But one day he's on the battlefield and he slays a dragon, and depending on who or which story you read, he either bathes in the blood of the dragon or he kills the dragon in a way that its fat, so its fat content of the dragon melts and drips onto the guy. Well, I personally read the fat version of that, so the fat of the dragon drips onto the guy, it's completely covered in fat everywhere except a little part of it on his back where a leaf landed, and on that part he's not invincible. On all of the rest of his body, he's completely invincible through the dragon fat. Because of that, he's like this big hero and can like do a lot of crazy stuff, and you could probably guess of how he dies at the end of the story because of that little spot on his back. But it's really good story. I can just recommend you guys read it. I remember it's one of the few stories I actually enjoyed reading as a kid, which is surprisingly, considering the fact that I did not like reading. But whatever, this is not the story we're going to cover in this video. The story I want to talk about instead comes from Poland and is called Krepel, or at least that's what I think the story is called, considering the fact that that's the name of the dragon that comes in the story, and everywhere I found it, they always referenced it as Krepel, so I think that's the name of the story. Anyway, the story goes like this. Back then, when the city of Byton, I hope I said that right, was still a small settlement on the hill of St. Margaret's, surrounded by forests. There was the story of a dragon living in a forest, which the older folk would tell each other. This dragon was guarding huge amounts of treasure. One day, a small farmer boy, he heard this story. He wanted to get some of that treasure for himself. Stumbling across scorched fields, fallen trees, and knight armor laying on a scorched battlefield, the farmhand slowly approached the grove, or the grotto, which the dragon was supposed to be living in. Once he entered the grotto and he finally came close, he heard all of a sudden a voice calling out to him. This calm and non-threatening voice said to him, "Why do you wish to start an unequal fight when I pose no threat to you? Instead, I invite you to my home and will even offer you some treasure. However, you will need to go to my second residence as there's not enough space here. I'll go ahead first to put the kettle on." The farmhand decided to trust the dragon and go to its second residence. There, the dragon eventually arrived, and they started talking a lot, and eventually became friends. The dragon decided to give this farmhand some of its treasure, which the farmhand returned to his village, and he laid it right there on the grounds, now in the present day of Petsutsky Street, on which he placed an image of honor for this dragon and his new friend, the crab. I love the story. It's so nice and refreshing to see an old folklore depict the dragon as a misunderstood being who simply can respond with kindness, but for some reason it didn't, as we see from knight armor and scorched battlefields. We see that no one ever tried to show in any kind of way kindness. All they went in there with anger and the intention to kill the dragon. But the moment the farmhand, who posed no real threat to the dragon at all, entered the cave, or grotto as it said, the dragon was friendly and decided to instead make a new friend. Really love it. Such a nice story. I love it. Shout out to Poland. They even put up a statue nowadays for the dragon, which is so cool. Definitely going to visit that city one day just because of that statue. It's so niche. I love the story. Let's go next to next. Let's go to the next dragon species. So now let's talk about the wyvern. The wyvern is a dragon species with 2 legs and 2 wings. Also a thick and scaly body and a long scaly tail. The wyvern is also a pretty famous description of the dragon. It's seen all across, not only mythological descriptions, but also pop media. When you compare the European dragon and the wyvern, these two are pretty much the 2 dragons that always appear in mythos. But it wasn't up until the medieval British area, when the medieval British heraldry was first seen using the word wyvern. This use of the word wyvern is seen in the Great Parliamentary or Bannerets Roll of 3012. This term or word describing a beast comes from the Anglo-Norman term guivre and the Old French guivre, which means poisonous snake, and also descends from the Latin vipera, also viper, which just indicates that the wyvern is more of a snake-like or serpent-like being, just elevating that fact of the wyvern again. Up into the late medieval periods, dragons and wyverns were not differentiated. This distinction was further brought forward through the elaboration in the subsequent heraldic manuals, including the Gerard Lang's The Academics of Armory from 1562. If you don't know what a heraldic manual is, it's like this big collection of terms and words which are used to describe something, and there's just written down what these terms describe. So the wyvern was written down to describe a dragon with 2 legs and 2 wings. Wyverns are also often depicted to be fire-breathing creatures, and they're also seen across cultures. And because of their limb count, wyverns are also more likely to actually have existed, which, not saying they did, don't call me crazy, but I'm just saying dinosaurs with 2 legs and 2 wings also existed. Of course, anomaly, I don't know. They were built different than the wyvern, but it's just the limb count for a lizard or a reptile makes more sense on the wyvern than on the European dragon. In this video description, or at least in the context of this video, a wyvern is a species of dragon, and yes, dragon is also a species of dragon. Confusing, but a wyvern is basically a dragon. Because of that, most pop culture references are pretty much every dragon in Game of Thrones and all of the dragons in The Witcher. But the pop culture reference I want to tell you more about is none other than the Skrill. Yes, again, from How to Train Dragons, I don't care, I love that series, introduced me to dragons, sue me if you have a problem with that. Skrills are lightning-shooting wyverns in the How to Train Dragon universe, with purple scales all over its body, which do give them a bit of stealth and night. They're often described to be some of the strongest dragons in How to Train a Dragon, and their shot limit is also 4, and they have to recharge themselves in thunderstorms, which is really cool. They shoot their lightning through like a metal spine in the back, because that they can like store up electricity. It's really complicated. I will one day maybe cover the tree of all of the dragon species in How to Train a Dragon. But the squirrel can get up to 22 feet in length, or 6.7 meters, and 40 feet in wingspan, or 12.90 meters. The concept of winged snakes appear all across Eastern, Near Eastern or Mediterranean cultures, which probably had an influence on the development of the modern image of the wyvern in Europe. The wyverns share a lot of same abilities as the dragon, being described as excellent flyers who circle the sky searching for new treasure, which when they find something, they capture it and bring it to their lair to hoard all of their treasures. And again, the wyvern is used as a symbol for demonic presence or the devil himself. So yes, wyvern also a big bad guy. But in the time back then, even when the word wyvern was being widespread, the term wyvern wasn't really used to describe beasts in stories. Wyverns and dragons were still referred to as being the same thing, or maybe the wyvern was sometimes described to be a species of dragon, which again, or a variation, some sort of dragon, which again points out to the fact that I'm calling these things species of dragons. But the story I want to tell you guys today is probably one of the best and heartbreaking stories I've read about dragons, which is really sad, but let's get into it. It's called Maud and the Wyvern. At least in this account, the dragon is described to be a wyvern, so I'm going to take this account. But basically, there's this little girl called Maud. She lived in a village, and next to her village, there was a forest. Maud always wanted to have a pet, but her parents always refused to get her one. So, Maud, wandering in the forest one day, found a little creature with 2 wings which were translucent and a snout which looked weird. Maud approached the little thing, and the thing was a bit scared at first, but Maud quickly became friends with the thing. Bringing it home to her parents, thinking her parents are going to be just as excited as Maud for this little cute creature which she found in the forest. Instead, her parents were scared. They instantly recognized that thing to be a wyvern, told her to bring that thing back into the forest and never touch it again. Maud, being sad, told her okay to her parents and went to the forest to bring the wyvern back. But of course, she did not hear of her parents. Maud, of course, did not listen to her parents. She might have went into the forest, but she did not leave the dragon there. Instead, over the years, she would keep it in the forest, feed it milk and other pieces of meat to nourish it, and after a time, the dragon started to grow more. Also the appetite of the dragon. The dragon all of a sudden started scavenging wild stock from the local farmers, stealing their sheep, their cows. And after a while, the townfolk were getting angry. Maud tried to stop the dragon from constantly stealing all of the livestock, but the dragon did not stop. And one day, the dragon even went as far as to kill a human and eat it, which just awakened the taste for flesh of the wyvern. Now, the wyvern, knowing how good human flesh tastes, went to the village and took even more humans as its victims. Maud tried to stop the dragon from taking so many lives, but the dragon did not listen. It was stubborn. And the dragon was on a killing spree, ready to kill every human, except the only human, which was the friend of the dragon, which was Maud. Maud, being such a good friend of the dragon, she could walk beside the beast, pet its claws, look at its eyes without fear, instead being able to admire them. Maud and the dragon had a relationship that no other human in the town had with the dragon. Because of that, the dragon did not care for those humans. The dragon was ready to kill everyone except one human. And I have put a link in the description where you can read the entire story, and I highly recommend you do it because I cannot do it justice. The way it was written on that website, it's truly amazing. Because of that, I'm going to read to you this part directly because my bad English skills nowhere near is this really good writing. Not for her the flame and the fear, only the love that ever the heart of the most terrible dragon contains, but which is so rarely ignited by human. She alone could walk safely beside it, stroke its ebony claws, and gaze without trepidation into its eyes of blazing chrysolite. Such is the power of friendship and love. Now, of course, the town people, they got angry. They were tired of this dragon constantly taking the livestock, attacking them. Because of that, a man from the Garstone family decided to suit up in his armor, ride into the forest, and put an end to this dragon once and for all. When the man arrived in the forest, he found the dragon and instantly attacked it. But the dragon was faster. It shot a fiery but the dragon was faster. It shoots fire at the man. The man quickly, out of reflexes, pulls out a shield and manages to block the fire. But in that mist, the man also managed to grab its spear, and while the dragon is breathing fire, throws the spear at the dragon, hitting it right in the throat, and ending pretty much the life of the dragon, leaving it there to bleed out. The man, thinking he's won the battle, he wants to inspect his new trophy or his newest kill, before a girl comes running out of the forest, throwing stones at him, irritating his horse and the man himself. As the girl didn't try to attack him, instead, she runs to the dragon, grabbing its head, staying right next to the dragon as the dragon's bleeding out. And instead of being angry or psychotic or gone mad, instead, the girl just has one emotion of sadness and grief. Grieving not a beast who was just slain, a beast who was terrorizing the town, instead mourning a friend who just died in the arms of her. The man, confused by this, simply just ignored the girl and rode back into the town, celebrating his newest kill, leaving Maud alone with a friend who was going to die very soon. Again, I cannot emphasize how bad I have retold the story. Please read the story in the description I put in the... Please read it at the link I put in the description. It's so good. The story is so good. Oh my god, I love it so much. It's so heartbreaking. I still remember when I first read it, was like in the middle of the night, it was like almost 3 a.m. And I genuinely almost cried because of how sad I was of the story. The story made me so sad because it's so good. It's described so good in that form of writing. There it says about the innocence of childhood and it suddenly come to a savagely premature end, which is such a good way to describe it. I love it. I love the story so much, even though the dragon does die at the end, but it really gets one emotional, and I can say nothing else than please check it out yourself in the link in the description. But I do have to say this website is a bit shady because it's an old folklore from, I think, Britain. Because of that, until you find a good written version of it, which is not Wikipedia, you do have to search a bit. But trust me, it's worth, just jokes. Whatever. Let's go to the next dragon species. So now, let's talk about the drake. Not the rapper, not the duck. The dragon species. Species with no wings, 4 legs, scaly body, scaly tail. So yes, big lizard, which is every dragon, but who cares? You see, the term drake was used back then to describe every dragon. Drake was just another form of dragon. It wasn't specifically used to describe a dragon with no wings up until J.R.R. Tolkien used that term specifically in his writing. The idea of a drake probably originated from Norse mythology, from things like the big word snake or all of the other kind of snake that exist back then. But none of them really are drakes. And to be more exact, it was really hard finding any kind of folklore or story, including a drake, where it was 100% sure it's a drake with a dragon with no wings, and not just a dragon, which was called drake. Because of that, I have no story. Instead, I just have a pop culture reference on the discussion of what type of drakes they are, because it seems like there are many drakes. There are the two classifications of drakes, hot drakes and cold drakes, or cold and hot drakes. Yes, I did say that right, correct, nice. But the difference of these two are that the hot drakes are red and orange drakes that breathe fire, which were described by Jennifer Walker, and the cold drakes were mostly bluish white drakes that could have a frost breath, which would freeze things. These mostly originated from the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, but he himself used these terms to describe either a drake that could breathe fire or simply could not breathe fire, and never combined the cold drakes with the idea of them being to breathe some kind of frost breath or something. So yeah, as I said earlier, drakes are weird. Basically didn't exist in mythological sense. They're often either they were just describing a normal dragon, or there was some kind of mythos that would just describe a big lizard, which I didn't want to include because I want to include mythos of dragons, dragon species. Because that, I have none, but you can look yourself up. I mean, every reference I found to drakes, which came from Norse mythology, was, to be exact, a serpent or something else. So can find anything, but if you find something, let me know in the comments. It would be really interesting to know of a folklore that specifically has a dragon with no wings in it. Which, no, it doesn't count if the dragon got its wings cut off. That doesn't count. It has to be born without wings. Next, let's talk about the Amphiptere. These are dragons which are more serpent-like built, that have no legs and 2 wings. Also scales and a long tail. The Amphiptere is found semi-frequently in European heraldic symbolism. It's sometimes portrayed on like crests, but most of the time it's seen being either balanced or warped around or wrapped around a pole or a spear. The real symbolism behind the Amphiptere isn't really known, but winged serpents usually represent people who quickly deal justice or strive after it. So some think that's the symbolism behind it. But there's also a theory that people who went to Ireland and repelled the serpent there, or serpents in general, got an Amphiptere on their arm, on like the arm sleeves, but that also isn't really a confirmed or settled fact, so it's also not been verified. But when it comes to winged serpents across cultures, there are many, just like the god Quetzalcoatl from the Aztec mythology. The problem is with Quetzalcoatl, you know, like the dinosaur. Was it a dinosaur? I think it was something else. It was not a dinosaur. Whatever. But the thing is, with that, it's often described as a feathered serpent, so a serpent with feathers and not wings, but there's some descriptions of it having wings, some not. What I theorize is because it's in combination with wind and air, that it probably had some kind of ability of flight, or were sometimes described flying. Because of that, it's unknown if it simply just did that like the Chinese dragons, or if it had wings. Because of that, I don't really want to get too much in the specifics of the Quetzalcoatl mythology, because I'm not sure if it's even a dragon at the first place, so I'm just gonna skip over him. But again, the use of Amphiptere in like a modern sense of like a classification of dragons didn't come until our modern fantasy stories. Because of that, it was really hard to find anything with mythological background for the Amphiptere. In pop culture, there are quite a few Amphipteres, one of which would be the Slitherwing, again a dragon species from How to Train Dragons. But what I do want to cover is something which I find very interesting, which is the Book of Dragonology, which Amphiptere is also included in. The Book of Dragonology is an old fantasy book or book series which describes multiple dragon species, but instead of it being mythologically, it's scientifically, which is a topic for another video. But now we're going to look at the Amphiptere from the perspective of the Dragonology books. The American Amphiptere is known scientifically as the Draco americanus tex, and also referred to as the moth dragon due to their habit of hunting at night. It is a true Amphiptere, as it is legless and has only 2 wings. Hunting in packs at night, they will drive the prey of cows and buffalo over cliffs in order to more easily dispatch them, and often use tactic as intimidating prey with fire, tail strikes, and high-pitched shrieks. That has been compared to a horde of giant barking bats. Though often not aggressive, make their lairs in boulder mounds or caves in the sides of sandstone valleys. So to come back to the mythological thing, I do have to say there were some origins in, again, Norse mythology, but again, most of the time, there were serpents, normal serpents, and I wasn't sure if they had wings, legs, or nothing. Because of that, I put them all in the serpent category just to be safe. So yeah, I'm not going to cover Norse mythology god or like dragon, whatever, in the Amphiptere category because it doesn't just, I don't think it fits. It's my video, I don't care, sue me. And the next species we're going to cover is none other than the Lindwyrm. In Central Europe, the Lindwyrm is most often described to be more of a serpent-like dragon with four limbs, 2 wings, and a scaly body. Depending on what tradition you're looking for, it sometimes even has hind limbs, but most of the time, in like Swedish traditions, it is a serpent-like dragon with no limbs at all and only 2 wings. But the definition of a Lindwyrm is not dependent on the limbs, but instead it's more often seen as a subspecies of Lindwyrm itself. So like if a Lindwyrm has 2 forelimbs or 2 hind limbs, it's just a species within the subspecies itself. Now, of course, this does come from folklore, meaning that when these species were defined, it wasn't really in mind of like connections with dragons or something. Instead, it was like its own thing, but whatever. This is what the Lindwyrm is. The Lindwyrm is interesting, in my opinion, because it's the first dragon to actually, back then, like when the folklore was written, people already thought about what is the difference when it comes to limbs. Like, are there different subspecies or what's going on? And I think that's really neat. It does help a lot putting the Lindwyrm into this video and find things out about him because of it being like its own standalone thing. It was not hard to find any mythos about it. So yes, I really like the Lindwyrm, and I do consider it a dragon. Some people don't, but or at least that's what I. Anyway, but pop culture of the Lindwyrm in our modern times are like things from God of War, or as I'm going to mention now, which I think is really interesting, as I already did with the Amphiptere, is the Dragonology books. In the Dragonology books, the Lindwyrm or the Draco serpentilis are long, worm-like dragons that live in the dry areas of East Asia. They have 2 wings and 2 legs, but the legs are not the back legs, instead they're the forelegs. So like they don't have legs, instead they have like arms, like forelimbs. And according to legends, everything that lies underneath a Lindwyrm increases in size and amount as it grows. Because of that, there are a lot of stories of Lindwyrms hoarding a lot of treasure and keeping it under them, and the treasure increasing after time because of the growth of the Lindwyrm. Not only that, but the legends also differentiate between 2 kinds of Lindwyrms, the good and the bad ones. The good ones are princesses that were turned into this beast by a curse. They most often represent good luck and stuff like that. And the bad ones, which are flesh-eating monsters that only care about the flesh they eat. In the Dragonology books, when a Lindwyrm attacks a human, it has a really interesting strategy. It can eat its own tail, turn itself into a wheel, and roll towards the human, which is so funny to me. You have a silly-looking dragon, which at least I think it looks silly, and then when you stand in front of it and try to run away, it eats its own tail and spins towards you. You know, like spin, like it's a green thing spinning towards you, like Steel Ball Run, Jojo, the anime. Really cool, I love it. You could draw a comparison to like Ouroboros or the Hoop Snake, and it's really cool. I'm so excited to get to the tree of Dragonology. But now let's see something a bit more interesting, which is the mythological stories of Lindwyrm. Or I wouldn't say more interesting. I think both are really cool. Both are like the same coolness. I really like both much. So the story we want to cover today is the story of none other than the Lindwyrm from Austria. Now I know There's a statue of the Lindwyrm in Austria, which depicts it as more of a European dragon, not very serpent-like. But I did say at the beginning, a Lindwyrm isn't really defined by like the limbs, and it's called the Lindwyrm. Its description fits so much, I'm just going to cover it anyway. And I really love it. I think it's neat. So, the story goes like this. Back long ago, when Duke Curid's root of Kahnburg, from the area around Lake Wörthersee, was a dark, swampy wilderness, feared by all. The story goes like this. Long ago, when Duke Curid's ruled from Kahnburg, the area around Lake Wörthersee was dark and swampy wilderness, feared by all. People and cattle would often disappear into the night, and no one would see what kind of monster would take them with them. All the people could hear were howls and growls of the beast hiding beneath the swamp. The Duke called on his bravest soldiers to try and defeat the dragon, but none of his soldiers ever returned successfully. Because of that, they came up with a strategy. They built a huge tower right at the border of the swamp area. There, they hid inside and instead placed right in front of the tower a bait, a fat bull with a hook inside of it. The members waited inside of the tower the night, and soon a terrible winged and armored dragon called a Lindwyrm emerged from the swamp to devour the bull. As it bit into the bait, the hook caught in its throat. The hidden warriors attacked and after a long and fearful battle managed to kill the dragon with their weapons. With the Lindwyrm defeated, peace returned to the land and a village was starting to be built right there where the battle took place, and eventually, after some time, the village evolved and the village will turn into the now known city of Klagenfurt, which is the capital of Austria. Oh, not Austria, Carinthia. Sorry. The Lindwyrm is such a classic story for me. It's a childhood core memory, at least. So stupid. And I really like it. I know the dragon dies, but at the same time, didn't really care much about the Lindwyrm. It's really cool. I like the story. And I think the Lindwyrm as a species of dragon is really neat and really interesting. So now, let's go to the next one, which is the sea serpent. The sea serpent is described to be a dragon that has 4 fins, no legs, and 4 wings. It's a serpent-like dragon with a mane at its tail that lives in the sea. Early eyewitness accounts of people like Aristoteles mention it in his work Historia Animalum, which is on a natural history, and also Strabo makes a reference of an eyewitness of a dead sea creature sighted by a Poseidonus on the coast of northern Levant. He reports, as for the plains, the first beginning at the sea is called Makras, or Makra Plain. Here, as reported by Poseidonus, was seen the fallen dragon, the corpse of which was about a platon, which is like 30 meters or 100 feet in length, and so bulky that horsemen standing by it on either side could not see one another, and his jaws were large enough to admit a man on horseback. And each flake of its horny scales exceeded an oblong shield in length. This creature was seen around 130 or 51 BC. And we see that in history, sea serpents were really important. I mean, they were mentioned all across cultures. And even if you look at older maps per se, you can see at like the borders of the map at deep sea, there's sea serpents being drawn in it to warn sailors of potential danger of what's out there. And when we look at stories about sea serpents, it's not surprising that there are so many of it. I mean, there are literally many fish who look like a sea serpent. I'm going to put a picture up of a fish that looks like one here. It's really interesting how much monsters actually live in the sea. To be honest, just thinking about the sea itself, it wouldn't surprise me if a sea serpent actually existed at one point. But we're not starting any conspiracies on here. But whatever, the sea serpent is a really cool creature, so it's not surprising that in our modern times it still gets mentioned in a lot of media. Things like Yu-Gi-Oh! There's a card which is a sea serpent. Or of course the Dragonology books. This time How to Train Your Dragons actually doesn't have a sea serpent. What it does have instead, but what there is instead, is in D&D. Now of course, yes, in D&D sea serpents don't exist. They're only in homebrew, but I've played so much D&D in recent times, I want to include some D&D reference here. And it's cool. The homebrew class I found is really interesting, so I'm going to describe it in this video. I don't care, I do whatever I want. The D&D class I choose for this video describes the sea serpent to have an armor class of 17, which is a natural armor, hit points to be 313 or 19 d20s plus 114, and the speed of 30 feet and a swim speed of 80 feet. It has a multi-attack which the serpent makes 2 attacks, one with its bite and one with its constrict. It can't make both attacks against the same target. Instead of making a bite target attack, it can use its swallow. But now, let's talk about something more interesting, which is mythology. In mythology, the sea serpent gets mentions all over the place. Like in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis 1:21, a serpent-like creature is to be described as part of the creation under Yahweh's command, which has the name of Taninim, or a great serpent, which gets mentioned in Amos 9:3. Also, in Aenide, a pair of sea serpents is said to have killed Laocoon and his 2 sons, as Laocoon argued about bringing the Trojan horse into the city of Troy. Not only that, but even Claudius Aelianus describes serpent-like creatures in his work on nature of animals that have thousands of legs and lives in the sea, which uses its legs to move all around the place and has the tail of a crayfish. In Nordic mythology, Jörmungand is described to be either a sea serpent or a long worm, which encircles the entire world, Midgard. Later mentions of sea serpents in Scandinavian folklore, especially Norway, also exist. One of them is the account of Saint Olaf coming to Norway and killing a sea serpent and then throwing that body on top of a mountain. Nowadays, the mountain is filled with landmarks which are all associated to that legend. And the legend I choose for the day to cover is the legend of Jörmungand. The legend goes like this. Thor once went fishing with the giant Hymnir. When Hymnir refused to give him bait, Thor killed his biggest ox and used its head. They rowed out to sea, first stopping where Hymnir usually fished, and caught flatfish and whales. But Thor wanted to go even farther. Despite Hymnir's fear, Thor set up a strong fishing line with the ox head as bait. The great sea serpent Jörmungand took the bait and Thor pulled him from the deep. The two faced each other. The serpent hissed and sprayed poison, and Hymnir turned pale with fear. Just as Thor raised his hammer to kill the serpent, Hymnir panicked and cut the line. Jörmungand sank back into the sea, returning to his place, robbed around the world. There are some accounts of this story that say Thor actually managed to kill Jörmungand in that by striking between its eyes, but I think because of later stories of Ragnarok being the big fight between these two and Thor eventually dying, I think that account of Jörmungand simply returning to the sea is more realistically. And the reason why I choose this one is because there's an old carving or drawing of that story, or depicting that story, which I think is pretty funny. It looks really cool, so I'm gonna put it up here. It's so niche, I really like it. But now, let's go to the next dragon species, which is also really interesting and culturally relevant species, the long. The Chinese long is a dragon which is depicted to have 4 legs, no wings, a head that has a mane and a beard most of the time, and a scaly, more serpent-like body with a tail that also has hair. The Chinese long is significant for Chinese mythology, Chinese folklore, or the Chinese culture in general. In that, the dragon is often depicted as having many forms, like a turtle or fish, but most of the time it is drawn or like depicted as a four-legged dragon, which we all know. And because of that, academics have found 4 reliable sources for the origin of this interesting dragon. The sources are either snakes, Chinese alligators, thunder worship, or nature worship. Now, these origins are only theorized, but they're a good start to find out where this dragon originates from, or at least where the legend of the dragon came from what it came. They are traditionally symbolized to have potent, suspicious powers, like controlling water or weather most of the time. Because of that, these dragons, they're really cool. They're known all across the world, so it's no surprise that they also get mentioned a lot in pop media, like the dragon from the Wish movie, not the one from like Disney. I think it was Paramount who made the Wish dragon movie, or in something like Spirited Away. In Spirited Away, there's a character called Haku. He is the daughter antagonist of the movie. And he's actually not a boy. Instead, he is a dragon that disguises himself as a boy. The dragon is described to be the spirit or god of the Gahuku River, which his birth name is also Kaukunushi Nigihayami. I really tried my best there, but whatever. The Chinese dragon is a really important dragon, I think, when it comes to dragon culture. But the one I'm covering today is the Chinese lore. There are multiple ones. There are Korean, there are Japanese ones. They're all different in its own culture and folklore type of way. But to keep it simple, I'm only covering the Chinese one. But I highly recommend you read more into the other cultures if you're interested in them, because it's really cool and really unique to find out more about dragons mentioned all across cultures. But now, in a mythological sense, the Chinese lore is really interesting. I mean, back then, the ancient Chinese called themselves the gods of the dragon, because the dragon was representative for their ancestors and their life energy. I mean, it's pretty obvious that dragons were really important back then. I mean, dragon-like carvings have been found as early as 6,200 till 5,400 BC in the Chaihai site in Liaoning. And in 1987, a dragon statue from the Yang Shao culture, which was around 5,000 BC, was discovered in Henan. And also carvings of jade dragons, so the dragon was carved into jade stones, were also found from the Hongshan culture, which was about 4,700 to 2,900 BC. And some of the oldest examples of dragon carvings are the so-called pig dragons. These are also from the Hongshan culture. So it's pretty obvious that the dragon had an important role even back then, and until now it has an important role. And something that was really important was the serpent-like or snake-like curved form of the dragon. That is because the oldest Chinese writing for a dragon looks similar to this curved shape of the dragon. These were found on jade amulets from the Shang dynasty. So it's really interesting that the form of the dragon comes from the writing, or at least is theorized to come from some form of that. The Chinese also thought that ancient fossils were dragon bones. For example, around 300 BC, Zhang Ku wrote about dragon bones which were found in Sichuan. These bones have been used in traditional Chinese medicine to care for wounds or to heal people, but it was later discovered that these bones were actually bones from the horse Hyperion. So yeah, no dragon bones really, but it was cool the thought of dragon bones being found. But what's also interesting, for me at least, is where the image of the dragon came from. I mean, at first the dragon wasn't this mythological creature we know of today. Instead, the Chinese dragon came from totems and pictures of animals. And they were also described by the scholar Wang Fu from the Han Dynasty that they had 9 special features. But also their appearance was really important that we should cover first. And their appearance were a horse's head and a snake's tail, with 3 main body parts, These three main body parts are head to shoulder, shoulder to chest, and chest to tail. And these 9 special features were antlers like a deer, a camel's head, demon's eyes, a snake's neck, a clam's belly, fish scales, eagle claws, tiger paws, and cow ears. On its head, they also had like this weird lump, which was called the chimu, and that gave the dragon the ability to fly because it had no wings. Something also interesting about the thought biology of a dragon was that they wouldn't hear through the ears, but instead hear through the horns, which is a really cool concept, just like the orb, which gives them the ability of flight. Also, what's important about the dragon are their scales. Yes, exactly, their scales. They are described to have 117 scales. Why that number to be exact? Well, because of 81 yang, which is positive, and 36 yin, which are negative. And because of that, at first dragons were seen as these wise and kind creatures that had a lot of wisdom and wanted to help, but only later, through Buddhist influence, the idea of some dragons being evil and causing floods and storms when angered by humans was introduced. But still, the Chinese dragon is so cool in this mythological sense. I mean, you could just imagine how many stories there are about these dragons, but the story I want to tell you about today is a really funny one, and I really like it, and I hope you like it too. The story is called Yi Gong How Long, or Lord Yi Likes Dragons. The story goes like this. A long time ago, a noble man called Lord Yi told everyone that he liked dragons. He had a dragon image on his clothes. Of course, this was before dragons were associated with the emperor. He had dragon images on his windsill and the pillars. The real dragon in the sky heard this and was very happy. The dragon decided to pay a visit to Lord Ye's mansion. Ye Gong was resting in his house. The dragon stretched his head through the window and rested his tail in the hall. When Lord Ye saw the real dragon, he was scared and ran away. It seemed that Lord Ye did not like dragons. He only liked things resembling dragons. Which the story is really cool. The story, or idiom is supposed to be a satire of people who only like the thought of things. So if you support something but don't actually like it, this story is kind of making fun of you. And I think it's neat, this whole concept of the story of this emperor seeing a dragon finally and then getting scared. It's so nice, it's so funny, I really like it. And that's why I think the Chinese long is one of the most interesting dragon species there are. But now, let's cover the next one, which is the Wyrm. But now, let's talk about the Wyrm. The Wyrm is a dragon that has no legs and no wings. It has a thick, scaly body, which is more serpent-like, and a long, scaly tail. In wider Germanic traditions, mythology, and folklore, the Wyrm is often described to be a giant venomous snake which hoards a lot of treasures, where you could draw connections to the Lindwyrm, but in later tales it's more similar to other European dragons, sharing some similarities like having wings, which you could call back to the fact that back then, when all of the mythology and folklore was created, there weren't really any specific definitions for these animals. That's why their appearance is all over the place. I mean, we know a dragon with no legs but 2 wings is an Amphiptere, but in some tales it's also described to be a Wyrm, which even was carried on into our modern times. Now pop culture with the dragon Caraxes from the House of Dragon. Caraxes is known as something like a blood worm. It's from the House of Dragons or Game of Thrones universe, and he's a fierceful and giant and powerful dragon, or worm, and to be more exact. And he's known for his participants or his importance in the Targaryen civil war called Dance of the Dragons. Dancing until I'm dead. Anyway, I personally have never watched the House of Dragons or Game of Thrones, so I can't talk much about it anyway. But I think he looks cool, and I've always liked the dragon designs from these shows. So I think he's a very fitting description for a more modern description of the worm. But now, let's talk about the mythology of the worm. The word worm itself comes from Old English and Old Norse and means serpent or dragon. In mythology, the worm is often this giant snake which hoards a lot of treasures and lives in caves and threatens people. In Norse mythology, there are also some worms. Some describe Jörmungand to be a worm, but I personally see him as a sea serpent because he encircles the earth and stuff like that. So he stays a sea serpent, not changing the video, I don't care. Or Fafnir, who was once a greedy dwarf who turned into a dragon to guard his hoards of golds. In Anglo-Saxon legends, the worm is often used in heroic tales as sort of like this beast which the hero has to fight, this giant fire-breathing dragon which often is described as a worm, in order to save his people. While in Celtic folklore, the worm is often associated with water, appearing as a river or lake serpent, so basically sea serpent but smaller, that brings chaos and floods when angered by the people. And unlike our modern fantasy dragons, the mythological worm is more serpent-like and represents more primal chaos and the destruction of natural causes or greed. At the same time, they could also represent challenges for a hero to prove his courage by defeating the beast, which ties back into the story I want to tell you guys today about, which is the story of Beowulf. The story of Beowulf goes like this. After his battle against Grendel and Grendel's mother, Beowulf returns home and becomes king of Geats. 50 years pass with Beowulf in charge, when a local dragon is angered when a slave enters its lair and takes a cup from his treasure. The creature attacks the neighboring towns in revenge. Beowulf and a troop of men leave to find the dragon's lair. Beowulf tells his men to stay outside, that this fight is his alone. But the dragon proves strong and mortally wounds Beowulf. Meanwhile, his kinsman, Wiglaf, scolds the other members of the troop for not going in to help. Before coming to Beowulf's aid, he cuts the dragon in the belly to reduce the flames, and Beowulf deals the fatal blow. In his death speech, Beowulf nominates Wiglaf as his heir and asks for a monument to be built for him on the shoreline. The story is really interesting. It's the basic heroic story, but at the same time, it's really cool with it dives a bit into dragon biology. I mean, his heir, Wiglaf, or kinsman back then, cuts into the dragon's belly to reduce its flame, not to distract or something, to reduce the flame. So kind of representing that the belly has something to do with the flame of the dragon. So I think it's pretty neat, and I think it's a good story to represent the worm, pretty basic, but pretty neat. I really like it, and so yeah, this is the worm. And this was it, all the dragon species. I did leave out 3 dragon species, which would have just been way too much overlapping with other species in mythological sense. So because of that, I did not include those. But if you guys want me to dive even deeper when it comes to fantasy lizards and dragons and what else I can find is out there, then please let me know and we will return to this tree and see what else we can find underneath it. But for now, all I can say is, again, huge shout out to Wendigoon for inspiring me to take this journey on and to even accept the letter in the first place. And to you guys, all I can say is thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, my dear forest dwellers, that every tree has a mystery that has to be discovered. And I hope I see you in the next video, and goodbye.
Day 1. Today I discovered the first tree. It was about dragon species. I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if I dug up all of the information, or at least the guy who gave me this letter. The letter says that today I get the information easy, but for the next tree I have to get it myself, and I have to wait until it appears on the map. I have no idea how he got that map into my room. I'm so confused on what is happening. The letter mentions stuff of a forest keeper and a staff and a mask. I have no idea. I don't know, but I I have for some reason this feeling that whatever is going on, I have to do it. Now, all I could do is wait for the map to make another tree appear.